Welcome back to Nightly Nonsense, and where we make some sense out of the nonsense that we either create or that is all around us. Been privileged is the word that I want. Privileged to have my cousin Craig here with me. We would talk about Christmas. Now we did two on kind of maybe the downside of Christmas, but when you look at the Christmas story, Craig, when you look at the Christmas story, what are your favorite parts of the Christmas story? What sticks out to you, maybe in a way that our listeners have never heard before? Right now, again, you could cheat right now. You could just say it all in Spanish, and most of our listeners have never wouldn't know what
eso sería una posibilidad.
Yes,
Nunca se me
exactly
ocurrió,
right. But when you look at the Christmas story, what sticks out? Don't cheat. Do the Sunday school answer and say, Andy, it all sticks out.
No, you know what? So here's what sticks out to me, honestly. It's harsh and painful. It is a harsh and painful story.
Yes.
I mean, we gloss over some of the details, but just some of the background. For instance, Joseph and Mary, they're raising a kid in a very oppressive world. You know, the Jews were oppressed by the Romans in lots of different ways. Mixed in with that, it was a bunch of basically traitorous Jews. Look at the ruling class of many of the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the high priest's family. They were basically, cooperating with the Romans, oppressing the Jews. And just read some of Josephus' account, and it's crazy the kind of world Jesus was born into. Then there's truly horrific things. There's the killing of the children in Bethlehem.
Yeah.
Like, we can't gloss those over. I wrestle with that because there's parts to this. I mean, it's obviously literally all about God intervening into real life humanity.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And the mess that we are, and wrestling with things like God could do things differently, but he often doesn't. Like, he could have done something about the slaughter of the children, but he didn't. He could have snuffed out Herod long before that, but he didn't. So there's lots of all that sort of background stuff that I think is really, really important to the story. It's easy. I'm not female, so I don't get lost in the little cuddly baby kind of stuff. Sorry, but there's so much more going around, and it's why I think we got to get beyond this little cuddly baby in the manger thing, because it's so much bigger and so much deeper, so much more important. We know why he came. I mean, this is just the beginning. He came because of the cross, but there's a lot of pieces to the story that are rough, that aren't, we can't sanitize. We have to really wrestle with them and realize that God knew about all of that. And there's tragedies there, but there's tragedies around us now. So the same God who came into that situation to do something astounding wants to do the same thing with us. He wants to come into our tragic, sometimes horrific, painful circumstances and do something amazing.
Amen. I love that. You weren't here when I started out, but one of the things that I was talking about when we got into the Christmas story was that we try to separate Christmas and Easter, and we try to make Christmas the cuddly part of the story and Easter the tough part of the story. But the truth is, there's nothing cuddly about the entire Christmas story. I preached this Sunday about the different aspects of the Christmas story, and that they weren't fun for Mary, and they weren't fun for Joseph, and they weren't fun for Mary and Joseph, and they weren't fun for a whole bunch of the different characters in this whole thing. Yet somehow the reality of the weight of what the story represents really comes through in some of the harshness and stuff like that, right? If you were going to say this is the character that or the characters in the story that I most am drawn to, who would that be in the Christmas story?
Oh boy, that's a tough one, because there's pieces to all of them that I really like. Certainly, growing up in the country on the farm, I have a lot of sympathy for the shepherds. Not an easy, pleasant job all the time. I have lots of curiosity for the three kings, the wise men. There's some really intriguing stuff about that, about where they came from and how they knew what they knew, and like there's some backstory there that we will probably never know on in this world. So those are all curious and interesting, how they could travel such a distance and bow down and worship a baby. They knew stuff. They knew stuff, and it affected their lives, and stuff was revealed to the shepherds, and it affected their lives. And of course Joseph, I think he's one of the unsung heroes often, because obviously he apparently dies sometime during Jesus' youth, and yet we see everything he does. We see a lot of characters in the Bible who do good things, but then we often see their flaws. There's no flaw. I'm not saying Joseph was perfect, but he's one of those characters we don't hear anything negative about him. So he's a really admirable character, and he's asked to do something pretty difficult, in the sense, raise somebody else's kid, which a lot of people nowadays can sympathize with that and understand that. It's
I love all those things. All right, so we're gonna wrap this up. Let me let you do your expertise, right? If you're gonna look at our listeners who are all over the world, and you were going to wish them a Merry Christmas, say something to them, what would that sound like in Spanish?
Feliz Navidad.
That's fantastic. So
You've probably heard that before.
Everybody can understand that. If you were going to give our listeners one thing to really chew on, think about this Christmas season, in Spanish, what would it be?
One thing in Spanish to chew on about Christmas.
Yeah.
Bueno, yo diría que deberían pensar profundamente en las cosas difíciles que pasaron durante toda la historia de la Navidad en la Biblia. Porque Jesucristo vino a un mundo que está sufriendo. Estamos rodeados de sufrimiento. Siempre la humanidad ha estado rodeado de sufrimiento, y aún hoy en día estamos rodeados de sufrimiento, pero Jesucristo tiene la respuesta.
And if you were going to translate that loosely in English, it would be?
Well, more or less, take a good deep look at the Christmas story and the suffering and the difficult things in that story, because Jesus came into a world that is suffering, full of people who are suffering. Then and now, we're suffering now. We're surrounded by suffering, and Jesus has the answer for the suffering in our lives.
Fantastic. That is something good for you and I to chew on. We'll see you next time. Nightly Nonsense.